Story 1: The Night Walker. I used to work night shifts at a small convenience store on the outskirts of town. It wasn't the best job, but it paid the bills. The store was quiet most nights, with only a few regulars stopping by. One night, something happened that still gives me chills. It was around 2 a.m. and I was stacking shelves when I noticed a man standing outside, just staring through the window. He was tall and gaunt, wearing a long coat and a hat that cast a shadow over his face. At first, I thought he was just a drunk or someone looking for directions. I waved at him, but he didn't move. A few minutes later, I looked up again, and he was gone. I shrugged it off and went back to work. About an hour later, the doorbell chimed and the same man walked in. He moved slowly, almost deliberately, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about him. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the back of the store, out of my sight. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I decided to check the security cameras. On the screen, I saw him standing in the back aisle, just staring at the wall. His back was to the camera, and he didn't move. "Sir, we're closing soon," I called out, but there was no response. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, but before I could hit send, the lights flickered and went out. The store was plunged into darkness, and I could barely see a thing. I fumbled for my flashlight and turned it on, the beam cutting through the dark. I slowly walked towards the back aisle, my heart pounding in my chest. When I turned the corner, he was gone. I checked the entire store, but there was no sign of him. I felt a chill run down my spine. I returned to the counter and waited for the lights to come back on. When they did, I checked the security footage again. This time I saw something that made my blood run cold. The man had been standing behind the counter right behind me the entire time. I hadn't seen or heard him. He was just there, watching me. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was long gone. They didn't find any evidence of him being there, but I knew what I saw. I quit the job the next day and never looked back. I still have nightmares about that night, and sometimes I feel like someone's watching me. The disturbing twist? A few weeks after I left, I heard that the new night shift worker had disappeared without a trace. No one ever found out what happened to him, but I have a feeling it had something to do with the man I saw that night. Story 2: The Mirror in the Attic. A few years ago, my wife and I bought an old house in the countryside. It was a fixer-upper, but we loved the charm and character of the place. One of the things that came with the house was a large, antique mirror in the attic. It was beautiful, with an ornate frame and a slightly tarnished surface. We didn't think much of it at first, but strange things started happening soon after we moved in. It started with small things, objects being moved, strange noises at night. We laughed it off, blaming it on the house settling in our imaginations. One night I was in the attic, sorting through some old boxes. The mirror was propped up against the wall, and as I walked past it, I thought I saw something move in its reflection. I turned back, but there was nothing there. I shrugged it off and continued with my work. A few days later, my wife mentioned that she felt like she was being watched when she was in the attic. I told her about my experience and we decided to move the mirror to the garage. Maybe it was just our minds playing tricks on us, but we felt uneasy around it. That night, I woke up to a strange noise coming from the attic. It sounded like footsteps. I grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate. When I reached the attic, the mirror was back in its original spot. I was sure we had moved it to the garage. My heart pounded as I approached it. In the reflection, I saw a figure standing behind me. It was a woman, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. I spun around, but there was no one there. When I looked back at the mirror, the woman was still there, her eyes locked on mine. She mouthed something, but I couldn't make it out. I ran back downstairs and told my wife what I had seen. She looked terrified and admitted that she had seen the same woman in the mirror earlier that day. We decided to get rid of the mirror. The next morning, we took it to a junkyard and left it there. We thought that was the end of it, but the strange occurrences continued. We would see glimpses of the woman in reflective surfaces around the house windows, TV screens, even in the water in the sink. It was like she was following us. The disturbing twist? We found out that the previous owner of the house had been a woman who disappeared mysteriously. Her family had searched for her for years, but she was never found. We realized that she was trapped in the mirror, trying to reach out to us for help. To this day, we still see her, and we have no idea how to free her from her prison. Story 3: The Forgotten Room. When I was a kid, my family moved into an old Victorian house. It was huge, with lots of rooms and a big backyard. My brother and I loved exploring it, finding all sorts of hidden nooks and crannies. One day we found a door in the basement that was locked. It was strange because we had thought we had seen every part of the house. Our curiosity got the better of us, and we spent weeks trying to find the key. Eventually, we found it hidden in a dusty old drawer in the attic. We rushed down to the basement and unlocked the door. Inside was a small, dark room with nothing but an old wooden chair in the center. The walls were covered in strange, faded symbols. We didn't think much of it at first, but after that day, weird things started happening. We'd hear whispers coming from the basement, and sometimes the door would be open when we were sure we had closed it. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone crying. It was coming from the basement. I grabbed a flashlight and went to check it out. As I approached the door, the crying got louder. I opened the door, and the room was pitch black. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. The crying stopped, and I was left in complete darkness. I fumbled for the flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. I started banging on the door, screaming for my parents, but no one came. After what felt like hours, the door finally creaked open, and I stumbled out. My parents were standing there, looking confused. They said they hadn't heard me screaming and thought I had been in my room the whole time. The next day, my brother and I went back to the basement, but the door to the room was gone. It was just a solid wall where the door had been. We told our parents, but they didn't believe us. They said we had overactive imaginations and had probably dreamed the whole thing. Years later, I did some research on the house and found out that the original owner had been a man who practiced dark rituals. He had built the room in the basement to perform his ceremonies and had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. No one knew what had happened to him. The disturbing twist? I recently visited my childhood home and talked to the current owners. They mentioned strange occurrences and a locked door in the basement that they couldn't open. When I looked at the symbols on the walls, I realized they were part of a ritual to trap a spirit. The original owner's spirit was still in that room, and I had unknowingly released it. To this day, I feel a chill every time I think about that room and the crying in the dark.